This is the Wishing Mandala Stamps and Stencils from Birch Press Design. For this project, I've taken a piece of cardstock and I'm adding a background layer of color first before I use any of the product. I'm beginning with Distress ink in Squeezed Lemonade, and I'm adding a very soft layer of color over the center of the piece. What I'm trying to do is put down nice soft color, and then I'm going to be going over that with a stencil with darker color, and so I want to see the difference and the contrast between the two different tones. I'm going to put a circle of Distress Oxide ink in Spiced Marmalade around the center, almost like a halo around that middle area. This is just going to give a little bit of a transition to a different color. And I'm going to finish that off with Distress Oxide ink in Picked Raspberry around the edge. Again, I'm doing this as softly as I can so that there's just a little bit of color going onto the background piece. I'm using a sponge. You can use any sort of applicator that you want to put this background ink on, but I like to use lots of little circles, and I want to use a light touch for this. Once I've got that color laid on, nice and soft, I'm going to put the stencil on top of that. Now there's 4 different stencils included in the stencil pack for this Wishing Mandala, and I'm going to use one of them. This is the one that has lots of different little pieces in it. I'm going to get that down onto that background piece, and I want to secure it so it doesn't move. I'll put just a little bit of tape on the sides. I'm just using some washi tape, but any sort of removable tape will work just fine. Now I'm going to repeat that same color scheme that I did before, but this time I'm just going to add more pressure when I apply the ink. I'm starting with the Distress ink in Squeezed Lemonade at the center, and I'm filling in all the holes towards the center of that stencil. Extra pressure, extra color, so that that yellow is stronger on top of that soft background yellow. And I'll repeat the process with the other colors. First with the Distressed Oxide in Spiced Marmalade, again adding extra pressure as I go around the circle, and I'll follow that up with the Picked Raspberry. When you do this, you're going to overlap just a little bit, so maybe a little bit of that pink goes over the orange, maybe a little bit of that orange goes over the yellow, so that there's a bit of transition as you fill in the open holes of the stencil. This will make things a little bit more interesting once you complete the final process of this stencil. Again, I'm using a circular rubbing motion when I'm applying the ink with the sponge. This ensures that all of the area of the open parts of the stencil get filled in all the way to those cut edges and helps to clearly define those shapes. Now I'm going to use some embossing paste here. You can use any kind of translucent embossing paste that you might have in your stash. This particular kind of paste has some glitter inside of it, so that when you spread it onto this stencil, the color that's underneath is going to show through, but it has the added benefit that some glitter is going to catch some light and make it all sparkly. I'm just using a tool to help spread it around and fill in all those holes. The trick here is to spread it one way, then spread it the other way, and kind of repeat that a lot as you smooth this paste all the way around the stencil. I put a few drops of paste on, and then I really work it into the stencil, so you don't really end up using all that much paste because you spread it around nice and thin throughout the entire layer. I did notice that I should have probably waited a little bit longer before spreading the paste because it started to pick up some of the ink color, and when I had some left over, I had to put it in a separate jar to keep it because it was no longer translucent. It was kind of pink, but I'll use that for another project. I want you to see what this looks like. I'm taking the tape off. I'm going to carefully remove that stencil. You want to pull it up as much as possible instead of shifting it side to side so that it will clearly hold on to the shapes that are defined by the stencil. I'm going to hold this up to the camera so that you can see all the nice shine and glitter that you really get and all the dimension that comes from using this embossing paste. Now I'll set that aside to dry, and I'm going to use the stamped words included in the set to create the greetings for the front of the card. These go with the Big Best sugar script and the Big Wishing sugar script dies that are sold separately. So I've gone ahead and stamped out and embossed the Wishing and the You Happiness. And I'm going to use the die that's included in the wishing sugar script to cut that wishing out. It matches perfectly. After that, it's a cinch to complete this card just by assembling the words. I hope you'll check out our other videos featuring the wishing mandala stamps and matching stencil sets.